What's going on, hockey fans? Welcome back to Kasing the League here on Believe Network. I am your host, Casey Hudson, joined by a very special guest, Brian Hedger from the Columbus Dispatch. And as you guys know, here on Kasing the League, we bring you all NHL topics, hot topics, and most importantly, NHL best bets. And now that we are at the end of the 2023 or 2022-2023 season, it's time to talk about futures, and it's time to see where these teams are heading and how they are formulating as they prepare to take on the 2023-2024 season. But as you all know, we don't talk about best bets without talking about who Kasing the League is brought to you by, which is Bet Online, your number one source for all of your championship finals info, stats, news, and scores. Get the latest odds and lines and the latest matchup reports for this year's NBA and Stanley Cup finals, which have passed. Bet Online is your sports intel headquarters this season, as we have you covered for all of your insider sports wagering needs, from basketball and hockey to MLB, UFC, and boxing. And you guys definitely want to check out all of the MLB information up right now. The fastest and easiest way to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your home. Get into the action today. Head to the website or use your mobile device to join, and be sure to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to receive your 50% bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, where the game starts. Now, after I get all of that out of the way, Brian, how are you? Thank you again for joining me after we met at the press box forever ago.
Seems like it, right? Forever ago. Like many things have happened since then. That was only like 5 months ago or 4 months ago, something like that. Down in
Yeah, I
Tampa.
think it was like freshly top in the year. Yeah, somewhere in January, I want to say. It was before All-Star Weekend. I remember that much.
Yeah, I'm
And
wearing
we were playing.
my lightning blue here for you.
I appreciate that. That's it's close. It's a couple shades off, but we can pretend it's lightning blue.
There you go.
I'm still in mourning.
Yeah, exactly. What is it? What's the official color? Is it electric blue? Is that what it is?
Oh, it's almost like royal-esque. It's like a darker royal blue. I guess electric blue
Okay.
would be closer.
But
I
colors these days have like cutesy names and things.
Yep.
What's its Crayola name? I guess I would say. Like, what's the lightning?
Oh,
Would
the
it be electric
Crayola
blue?
name would
I would
be
call it
electric
electric
blue.
blue. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're gonna go with electric blue. That's what we're gonna do.
Or heartbreaker blue. I've seen a very
Whoa.
extensive palette where it actually referred to it as heartbreaker blue. And I was like, well, that just kind of replicates my emotions for this season. But again, as journalists, we can't be too emotionally
Nope.
involved. I'm still working on that part for sure. Growing up in Tampa and covering your home team is very hard. So to separate the two, it's just a consistent internal conflict I deal with. But Brian, I got a chance to know you. I love talking hockey with you. But more importantly, fans across the NHL as well as Columbus need to know who you are. So we do this guest icebreaker. Kind of get a
Okay.
vibe for who you are. A speedy, skilled winger, a chippy, chirping center, a protective defenseman, or a quirky goalie. I feel like a lot of them speak for themselves, but where do you lean more towards personality wise? I could always give examples of where my family puts me, or
Yeah.
our previous guest, Molly Walker, where she landed.
Where are you at?
I am the chippy chirping center, but
Oh, okay.
that's by way of vote of my family, which I'm the youngest who had to like endure all the suffering of older siblings. I had two
Yep.
older sisters, and then we got a brother later down the line. So I was the youngest of four, and I had to take all of their personalities and combine it into mine. So now I'm the mean one, they say.
Wow.
I
Well,
know.
I was gonna. It's a tough choice. Like, what is quirky goalie? Does that mean somebody who's like kind of chirping at people as a goalie?
It's a combination of everything. It's more of the, like, goofy personality, the jokester, you've got unique rhythm to you, but also you can chirp and stand up for yourself when you need to. Like, think Aiden Hill in the last 2 games of the series. He could put up the gloves if he has to, but he's also just the smiley, fun going guy most of the time.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna have to go quirky goalie, but only because I played. Never played hockey, but like in floor hockey, I was always the goalie, and it
Okay.
wasn't because I wasn't good at shooting the puck. I liked playing goalie,
Oh,
and I always like in Chicago. When I worked in Chicago. I always had a really good like kind of friendly relationship with Corey Crawford. And like goalies are a little out there. That's what you're talking about with the quirky
yes.
they're a little out
Yep.
there, and what's really funny is I didn't realize this until I started covering hockey. but like I'm sort of on that same wavelength with them. Like I almost always get along with the goalies, like Elvis here and Jonas Corposalo, when he was here. Like I sort of get them, but like I
Hmm.
also have part of me that's the chippy chirping center as well.
Ooh.
I would be more of a chippy chirping winger though if I were a forward. I wouldn't be a center. I think I would be a winger who just kind of gets in your grill all the time.
I
And
love that.
yeah,
So
like
you
a
got the best of both worlds there. You can
yes,
understand the goalie rhythm, but you can pull that chirper out of you when you need to. And
for
on
sure.
the wing side, okay. See, I love this because I feel like we get a chance to understand each other a little bit more. And the first time somebody was like, "Well, what do you mean by the chippy chirping center?" Well, the two-way drive for one, but I could be a very calm, collected, chill person, and then. As my mom
It
puts it, I could be
snaps.
the pit bull with lipstick. Yeah, it's just it
Yes,
goes both ways. You got to wear both hats sometimes. So there we go.
for
I think we
sure.
both level at least on the chippy and chirping, and hopefully we'll never be chirping one another
No,
unless our teams
hopefully
are
not.
playing against each other. So hopefully this doesn't feel like a chirp when I ask you about the Blue Jackets 25, 48, and 9 record, how that made you feel in terms of music. Is there a
Uh,
song that can come to mind that can describe the 2023, the 2022 to 23, see, I'm already a year ahead,
yeah.
season for the Columbus Blue Jackets. Heading into this previous season, there was excitement because of Johnny Gaudreau. There was excitement of how things will pan out because he was what, 115-point guy. And the acclimation period, of course, needs a little more time or a little less time, depending on the guy. And then him aside, you got Patrick Laine, who hasn't really played 80 games since he was with Winnipeg. So, how would you encompass this previous season in a song?
This is a tough one. Because when I looked at it, I started thinking, I think I'm gonna choose a song that, the one I picked was more about kind of being a Blue Jacket overall,
Mm.
and not necessarily just this season. And I was actually gonna pick my son is into like acting and stuff now, so I'm actually going with the original Broadway production of School of Rock, and it will be the song "Stick to the Man"
Oh, I
because
love
this.
it.
Oh yeah, because like this is like everybody else in the NHL to the Blue Jackets is the man, and
Mhm.
they always get it stuck to them. They're one of the only teams to fall in the draft lottery this year. Their
Yep.
pick is the one that Kevin Weeks accidentally leaks out early. Like people forget that we even exist here in Columbus. Like all the time, over and over and over again. So I think that I would pick "Stick It to the Man," especially after like going forward after last season. They it was a tough season, obviously, but
Yeah.
I feel like there was a lot of I mean, there's just a ton of injuries as well. Like Patrick
Mhm.
Laine was injured in the second period of the first game of the season, and like that was the first of three injuries. So him and Gaudreau never like really developed chemistry and all that. So that was a tough season, but I feel like they kind of have their backs up a little bit,
Mhm.
about and like looking forward and everything. They just apparently hired Mike Babcock. They're like trying to, and they brought in a couple defensemen. So I think next year and just kind of going forward, they're going to be trying to stick it to the man.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much, especially because you're not wrong when you mention the fact that it's kind of overlooked, the Columbus Blue Jackets. I had a friend who was asking me about hockey, and they're newly getting into it because of my job specifically. So I appreciate the effort. But they made a comment about like Ohio has no hockey, so something, something, something. And I was like, I don't think that's accurate. I think there's this place called Columbus.
Columbus.
And look, while it's not the prettiest record, they still had some extremely entertaining games where you were like, wow, this team has a lot of potential if and when putting the pieces together. So you mentioned something that I think is probably important to start creating space for Johnny Gaudreau and then alongside Patrick Laine. And I had this one specifically because when you and I initially talked in the press box, I think the Columbus Blue Jackets were heading into their first power play of the night. And you were so insightful on describing how both Gaudreau and Laine like have the same sweet spot, the same sweet circle on the ice. So which one of them was going to have to readapt in order for both of them to be effective and make that power play strike hot? and that was kind of an issue. Special teams were struggling a little bit, but I think it was more of an identity crisis. And as you said, health playing a huge role in all of this. There wasn't enough time for everyone to kind of find their cohesion and their role. How do the Columbus Blue Jackets move forward into this upcoming season, creating space for Johnny Gaudreau to be an effective player like he was for the Flames, and then to allow Laine to be the guy who he was, point streak wise or game attendance wise with the Jets and putting up the numbers that he can through, I don't know, 30 something games?
Well, there's good news here for Blue Jackets fans who are watching because as the season, so after you and I talked in the press box down there at Amalie Arena, the season obviously goes on, and they were still kind of fighting that issue you're talking about. But a couple things happened. So one was Laine finally got healthy, like for a little while, and they got time to play together and kind of figure that whole thing out a little bit. And then also Adam Boqvist got healthy as once Zach Werenski went down 13 games into the season. He's your number one power play guy, runs the point. But he goes down 13 games in the season. Boqvist was already out at that point with a broken foot. But when he comes back, it was something very interesting developed, and that was, he's a really good offensive player, offensive defenseman, but he's a right shot, right? So he's a right shot defenseman. Laine plays the left. He likes taking that one-timer from the left circle with the right-hand shot, like the Ovechkin office or whatever. And then Gaudreau's a left-hand shot, and then he's the one that kind of has to make that adjustment you're talking about and go over to the right side. But what happened was Boqvist started kind of just really massively developing in the power play area. There was a point, I want to say it was like mid to late January all the way to like March. When I looked at it, they were like, it was the top 2 in the league in power play. And people don't realize this. They were hot. And Boqvist was moving the puck around, and with his right hand shot, it was easier to get a pass over to Laine quicker and faster for a one timer than when you have a left shot over there, the guy's got to move his body a little more weird, or send like a backhand kind of over that way. And Gaudreau doesn't really have a one timer per se, even though he's in that, like, he's got an offhand on the right. He doesn't really like taking one-timers. So that would be like, if you had a guy on the right who really liked taking one-timers, then it would be great to have Werenski with a left-hand shot feeding that guy, right? And that kind of thing. So, it's fun. Power plays, it's a lot of fun to watch because when you start to understand how it all works, like you get to watch the Lightning, on a and
the power play at home is something to watch, that's for sure.
Oh, it's amazing, and that's what they do is what every other team in the league is trying to do, right? Like they got guys, they have 5 options. They do, and they use them perfectly. So other teams are trying to mimic that. I think a couple things happened. Like I said, Boqvist was one. The other one was the associate coach Pascal Vincent, who we don't know if he's going to stick around yet or not. His name was kind of kicked around as a possible replacement for Brad Larson here, and then he's also interviewed a couple other places. Very brilliant hockey mind. If you ever get to talk to him, he is really good. But anyway, he put a rookie, Kirill Marchenko, in. He put him in the bumper role, and like that, he had never played that role before. But really, what you need there, as you guys see down in Tampa, you need a guy who can not only distribute the puck a little bit, like Braden Point. You need a guy who can get a fast one-timer off. It doesn't have to be nobody who's going to be like, whoa, like tickling the
winding up the stick flex, because it's telling. And the minute they see that, then they load up on you defensively.
If you can get a one-timer off, even a half one-timer, like a real quick one from the slot, that's the most dangerous ice or area on the ice to score from, is right between the circles, right? So that's what makes Braden Point, among other things, like such a threat. But like Marchenko can do it too, and so like he made him. And so when you get now you're getting more options, right? And now it takes more pressure off of Laine and Gaudreau. And so at the same time that those things were happening, Laine and Gaudreau started figuring things out a little bit, and I think what they've done, if you watch them, they interchange. Like Laine doesn't just camp on the left circle like he used to. He kind of moves around. Sometimes he'll be at the point. Sometimes he'll be on the right. Gaudreau will be at the point, but Gaudreau will be on the left wing, so you don't really know where they're all going to line up. And I think that's that unpredictability, I guess you'd say,
Yep.
it kind of made them better.
Absolutely, and it helps the quicker that they can adjust, and you actually pointed that out in the middle of that game. You were saying that if Lonnie can do that more, if he could become better acclimated of positioning himself differently on the ice and getting comfortable there, this team can start to develop. So as you mentioned, we had that conversation back in January.
Yeah,
You start to see those hopeful streaks, and as you mentioned, Blue Jacket fans, something to look forward to heading into next year. Now, I'm so glad that you mentioned this guy. Marchenko, because I had a question about the younger players that will probably have a larger expectation on their shoulders heading into the upcoming season. And I love that you mentioned Marchenko because he showed glimmers of a guy who can really grow in this system. I mean, through 59 games, 21 goals, 25 points. Then you also have Johnson, 24 assists. Helping out in that assist column was so crucial for a roster that just started to face injury after injury after injury. Footy, I thought, had a pretty good moments here and there. And then you had Blankenberg with 14 points through 36 games. Can you kind of talk to us about the younger players that showed that they can take maybe a few larger roles heading into the 23-24 season?
absolutely. That you touched on a number of them. I mean, that's the thing with this team, and that's what makes things so exciting around here is that there is talent coming. There's talent already here, and it's developing. There's also talent that's coming in the pipeline as well. And that those are all things that Blue Jackets fans should be really excited about. I mean, Marchenko. Well, first of all, he is. What did Kent Johnson one time? We were in the locker room. This is just to give you a sense of Marchenko's personality, right? Like he is like the guy is never not smiling, and he is always kind of laugh. He's the first one where if there's a scrum going on somewhere else, he's the one sneaking up with his Gatorade or like his what is it, the BioSteel that they have now,
Yeah.
and he's like in there, and then his only question to his teammate is, "Do you like playing with Marty? Do you like playing with Marty?" Like that kind of thing.
No.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Every time it became like the most popular question in the locker room, and it was always asked by Marchie, right? Like it was always asked by him. So that's kind of who he is, and it was funny because he's always smiling. And he and Kent Johnson are very interesting because those guys don't leave you have to forcibly make them leave the ice after
Right.
practice. They're
Like it's
rink
time to clean up, boys. Let's go.
and they love it. Like both of them will watch NHL Network, right? And they'll see some other player do some crazy move, and the next day at practice, both of them are out there trying to do the move, and they're all like, "Yeah, I can do that. I can do this. I can do that." I mean, that's really exciting. That's a passion for the sport. So we're talking to someone's talking to Marchenko at one point, and Johnson kind of looks over and says, "He's like, yeah, he's kind of like our Danny Rojas." Which
Oh
is
my
like
gosh. Ted
like
Lasso.
the Ted Lasso reference, right? He's our Danny Rojas, I love hockey,
Football is life. Hockey
yeah,
is life for him.
hockey is life for him for sure. And so it's honestly in a season like they just had, to have a guy like that in the locker room was huge. It just to help keep everyone's spirits up. The losses are mounting and everything, but it helped having certain guys like that around the locker room who just enjoy
Right.
playing the game. So he's a name to really watch. And he's not just a smiling face. The guy, I mean, he's like a smiling faced assassin. Like he'll put the puck in on you. I mean, I think he will score 40 goals in the NHL at some point. He was
Wow.
on pace as a rookie for over a full season for over 30, and he ended up with
Mhm.
I think it was like 20. I don't have it off the top of my head, but it was around 21 goals or 22 goals or something. And he
21,
only
right on the mark.
yeah, it was 21. I think he only played like 50 games or something. Like
Yep.
it's kind of crazy. Like he didn't come up until early December, and then he's just putting it. And then he starts off, and it was like 13 goals, no assists. And people are making jokes about how he's trying to win the Cy Young Award. Like 13-0 and
Right.
all that kind of stuff. So he's one to watch. Kent Johnson is another one. They mentioned him. Um, that's a name you're going to have to get to know because he is going to be a force in this league.
He was a sweet surprise.
He was, and I was there the night in Nationwide Arena when he pulled off I like to call it a lacrosse move because I went to Michigan State, so I don't like to really call it the Michigan, but it is the Michigan.
Oh.
Oh yeah, it's the Michigan. You know all about college rivalries.
Yes.
So But
Especially when it comes to Michigan and Michigan State hockey,
heck
so
yeah. So, but I'm kidding. He pulled off the Michigan, and honestly, it was a really cool moment. It was against the Islanders, and it wasn't a hot dog move. That was what made it so awesome. He rips the puck from a guy in the offensive zone. It was a turnover. The Islanders had it. He rips it from him. What goes around the wing, puts it through his legs to get around a guy in the corner, goes to the back, and then all in one fell swoop, he picks it up and does the Michigan and scores. And it was like, what just happened there? Like, oh my gosh. And so you see it on replay and you're like, that was an amazing hockey play. And it wasn't just a hot dogging thing. And
and to triple check for the name on the jersey, because I know when I saw it, I was triple checking for his name on the jersey because the Islanders may have not had the best season for their roster, but they do have quality goaltenders.
oh yeah.
So to do that at his age and time in the league, I was just like, who the heck just did this?
And what was cool was and he didn't know this, but like I think it was the to the day, it was the 27th anniversary of the first Michigan goal scored by Mike Legg at the University of Michigan. And
Yes,
so
it
it was
was.
on the day of that the Michigan goal first happened. 27 years later, he pulls that one off in Columbus, Ohio, which is like Michigan's like huge rival, obviously Ohio State. So it was really cool. It was a neat moment. So just for him to be able to do that, I mean, he does it so incredibly. Like he can just pick the stick up, or the puck up at any time that he wants.
Wow.
He's playing. He's on a team this summer. It's like a inline hockey team, like rollerblades or whatever, or like
Okay.
roller hockey out in
Mhm.
Western Canada, and his team, he's got Connor Bedard is on the team, who's like going to be the number one pick in the draft, and then also Andrew Crystal is on the team. He'll probably be a first round pick as well. So,
Yep.
and they're actually not even like they're good, but like there's other teams that are even better, which is kind of silly. But there was a video that was going around of Kent Johnson. He actually picked the puck up on the rush, and yeah, he like picked it up on the rush and with his rollerblades and everything, and just stuffed it in that way. So I'm like,
What?
I'm wondering if he's going to be able to try that move, like in a breakaway or a shootout or something. I don't know if can he do it in a shootout. I don't even know, but we're gonna find out. I think because this
The
kid.
possibilities.
Yes. Real quick, before I know we want to move on. Keep the name Yegor Chinnikov in mind as well.
Okay.
He's a winger. He has a wrist shot that I think it averages in the low 90s mile per hour. Like it's pretty incredible. He
Oh
can.
my gosh.
He was in Finland, and like when they were in Finland to play Colorado, and they were doing a clinic with young Finnish players, and the Blue Jackets were hosting this clinic and everything. So they had a radar gun out, and they were like, "Let's see how hard Udegaard can shoot it." And apparently, the stories I heard from Blue Jackets coaches and staff members is that he approached 100 miles an hour with his wrist shot. Like it was
That's
around 90.
insane.
Yeah, like he can freaking shoot the puck. He can really shoot it. He hasn't really blown up yet, as like a
Mhm.
breakout type thing, but he was kind of on his way. And this will be his third season. If he can stay healthy, he had a bad ankle injury like halfway through, and that cut out the rest of his season. But he was on the way to scoring probably 16, 17 goals, something like
Wow.
that. And so I think that, if he starts figuring this league out and using that shot, like in finding areas to get it off in dangerous areas, he's going to score a lot of goals, and
Yeah.
he's going to be an impressive guy for them as well. So you got him. You still have Cole Sillinger's another one. We didn't mention him yet. He's a center, had a really tough season last year. Scored 16 goals as a rookie though when he was 18 years old. So he's got potential as well as a center. They got him in droves. They're coming.
Right.
Adam Bilquist is still only 23 years old. It's like he's not
I
old.
forget that. I definitely
And
forget that, I'm not gonna lie.
yeah, well, because he's been around forever, right? He's been around for
Mhm.
a while. I mean, he was up at like 19 or whatever. And then I think they're hoping that their number one pick, their first round pick from 22, David Jiricek, as a right-handed shot defenseman. They're hoping that he can make the NHL roster this year and kind of contribute that way. So they got a lot of talent coming.
Mhm.
But it takes time to develop this stuff.
Yeah, and you never know when that development's gonna happen. They might need a season, they might need 2 seasons, they might just need a summer or the right training camp, but for definitely no rush here. The more information you wanna give, I am all for it. But as you
Awesome.
mentioned the blue line, that's definitely one of the topics I was very excited to get into with you because you guys acquired, Damian Severson. I love what I saw out of him towards the end of the Devils season. I think in the right system, he can produce that much more. And something that made me that much more excited about this particular pick was I started looking through obviously the health of the Columbus Blue Jackets. There was not many guys that were even able to play 70 games. There was only two defensemen that played 70 plus games for the Blue Jackets. And out of the top six defensemen, they combined for 122 points, 93 assists, and just one power play goal. And I know at least for us in Tampa Bay, our defensemen play a huge role in the power play and setting things up and anchoring at the blue line. So now getting a guy like this who's coming over with one power play goal. And let's see, through 81 games, he averaged 19 minutes and 57 seconds, 7 goals, 26 assists, 33 points. And he sat at a +9, which I love because that shows that there was offense generating while he was on the ice. Can you talk about this acquisition and kind of where they need to build and grow on their blue line?
Yeah, absolutely. Before I do, though, I will say that you, Casey, were the one that kind of shed the light for me on Perbix down there,
Yes, I love
and
him.
I'm telling you, like, because we were talking, and you're like, "Oh, this guy's, this and this and that," and I started watching him, and I'm like, "Wow, this guy can really play. Like, he's really good." So I watched him the rest of the season. I was very impressed by Perbix. I think they got themselves a gem down there in him, and people don't
I'm
talk
so
about him
excited
enough.
for his upcoming season. No, and
Yeah.
then he went to USA Hockey and he showed that much more that
Yep.
he's the kind of guy why I got excited about Perbix. It took me 2, 3 games to fall in love with his game because you saw somebody that was able to make the smallest adjustments very quickly game by game. I can't say that there are many games that Perbix had that were identical to one another. He increased every single time. So seeing that, seeing somebody who's developing in a system and being able to make those quick changes, I know everyone talked about his hockey IQ, but it's one thing to see how long it takes for him to apply his hockey IQ game by game. So I think Perbix is going to be fantastic. My rant
Yeah.
again about Nick Perbix.
Hey, you're not wrong. I like him a lot, and I watched him the rest of the season. I was really impressed. Getting back to Severson, it is interesting. So Severson was actually the second established NHL defenseman that they got within a 72-hour window. They pulled off two trades. They ended up getting Ivan Provorov as well from the
Mhm.
Philadelphia Flyers. They got him first, and obviously that was a controversial move
Yeah.
in a way because he yeah, didn't wear the pride jersey and things like that, citing religious reasons and things. Um, I know as a defenseman, I think that I would expect him to have a bounce back year. Not, he wasn't bad with Philly, but Philly
Mhm.
was also not a very good team. And the guy has a lot of potential on the ice, and he's a left-hand shot. They were looking to replace what they lost in Vladislav Gavrikov. They traded
Yeah.
Gavrikov because they felt Gavrikov was asking too much, whatever, or too many years or something, and so they traded him to the Kings. And then it's kind of funny how it worked out. It was like a three-way trade with like the Flyers, the Blue Jackets, and the Kings. And essentially, the Kings are basically paying like they're picking up like 30% of Provorov's contract because they
Oh wow.
acquired Provorov in the deal and then traded him to the Blue Jackets. So they're picking up like 30% of his deal. So the Blue Jackets get a 30% discount. And then they also reached an agreement with Gavrikov for 2 years at like 5.9. So it's almost like they're paying 7 or 8 million for Gavrikov. The Kings
Mhm.
are, and the Jackets are getting Provorov, who they think is an adequate replacement for Gavrikov at like 4.75 or something. And then Philly gets just a ton of like prospects and picks and everything. So all three are happy, that kind of deal. So they got Provorov for the left side of the second pairing, and
Mhm.
where Gavrikov played. When everyone's healthy, and then they address the right side, and we're not sure yet where Severson will play, whether it'll be up with Zach Werenski on the first pairing, or maybe he slots in there as Provorov's guy on the second pairing. Either way, I mean, on the first pairing, if he's able to play that spot, then that's kind of a Seth Jones former Seth Jones position where I don't think it never got talked about enough what Seth Jones did for Zach Wierenski,
Mm-hmm.
and Zach's the first person to talk about it. So yeah, it was a huge help because basically what he did was when they got in the offensive zone, he essentially Seth Jones would essentially say like, yeah, I'll look for some offense, but I'm handling the defense. You make yourself a fourth forward and score goals, basically. And he did. He had like a
Yeah.
20 plus goal season. So when he goes, they've not replaced him yet. They've not figured out a way. So like we're trying to figure out, are they going to give Boquist an opportunity to get up there and play? Because he's a right hand shot, righty
Mm-hmm.
lefty. Like, can he play with Wierenski? And if so, then Severson slots down with Provorov, another righty lefty, and that's two veteran defensemen. It's like your shutdown pair, right? Like that
Yep.
becomes like kind of like your shutdown pair. Werenski and Boquist become like your more top offensive
Offensive
guys,
defenseman.
as long as they can not, as long as they're not like giving up scoring chances left and right. If it's just average defensively, then you take the offense up there. And then the third pairing, you go down. You mentioned Blankenberg earlier.
Yep.
Nobody talks about Nick Blankenberg. This Blankenberg is a lot like Perbix in that nobody talks about him, but he's a pretty good player. Like he's smallish. He's built a lot like Torrey Krug, right? But he's also got some snarl like Krug. Like he'll get into you, and he has no qualms. He's like what was our player descriptions that we had to pick from? It was like
the chirping.
Protective defenseman.
Yes, protective defenseman, chippy chirping center, or the skilled speedy winger.
Yeah,
And then
I
of
would
course
say he's more of a chirpy protective defenseman, even though he's undersized.
Love that.
Yeah,
Love that.
yeah, he'll get into you. So he'll probably be in the mix for the third pairing, or who knows where it all shakes out. But like that's what it looks like on paper. You still have Eric Branson here, and it's it's an interesting thing because like there's a lot of Jackets fans look at the salary, and they did overpay, as far as what you're ultimately going to get, from a production standpoint. But he is a veteran, and he is really, really tough, and he's also a great locker room guy. Like he helps keep the culture together in there as well, and he's going forward 3 more years. Good Branson. I mean, I've seen him skate to other teams' bench and invite the entire bench to fight him, and nobody comes out. You know what I mean? Like
no, thank you.
That happened like multiple times. Because fans would be like, "Well, he only had 2 fights, so what's he really bringing?" I'm like, "Well, he invited this entire team to fight.
He's trying." Yeah.
Right. And they're like, "Yeah, we're good. No, thanks." He's a monster. So I think
Talk about winning the mental battle there.
for sure. And we call him the sheriff. Like he's the sheriff, Sheriff Gudbranson, and he's your protective defenseman as well. But I mean, he'll be on the third pairing as well, and they're loaded on defense, really. But it's interesting. Sorry, there's a reason they got Provorov. There's a reason they got Severson, right? Because they were so young. They're way too young, and that's why they were giving up a ton of scoring chances. Because those guys are all trying to learn, and it's like they're all doing it at the same time, and that's never a good recipe. You got to have some experienced guys in there as well. So it's like Jackets fans should be excited that like they have really, really good talent coming. We haven't even talked about Stanislav Svozil. He played for, or he was teammates with Bedard this past season in Regina in WHL, and he was more than a point a game, I think, as a defenseman.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, he's a really, really good offensive defenseman. Again, another guy who's got to put on size and strength to make it in the NHL, but he'll get there eventually. The Cleveland Monsters are going to have, if they can keep him healthy, they're going to have quite a blue line this year because they're loaded. And so again, they're loaded on D, young D. And so that's why they got the 2 veterans. We'll see how it works out and see how that pans out this year.
Yeah, and the veteran presence is going to help because, as you mentioned when you were describing the top line, whatever movements might come about for Werenski, it's the fact that you've got to be able to free up those guys that can track back and play defense and contribute offensively. And if you don't give them an opportunity to do that, and you're trying to force an offensive defenseman to be a stay-at-home defenseman, you're not going to get the best out of them. And I think I saw parts of that when the Lightning were going through a bit of a transitional period in their D zone, losing Ryan McDonough. Even though there's a lot of veterans back there, it's still the right pairing. It's still having the offensive defenseman, the lefty guy with the righty guy. We're so short on the right-handed shooters back when it comes to defensemen. So those are all crucial movements to help. But you mentioned the guys that are going to make an impact. I really did like Blankenberg, and I think that he's going to develop very well. I mean, I think it was only through like 30 games. If you look at his numbers, besides the fact that he was getting scored on a lot because you see him trying to piece the game together as he's skating, once he gets through a solid training camp and stuff, he's somebody who's going to take that next step. Which pivots us over to, are there any priority re-signings being discussed right now for the Columbus Blue Jackets? That's typically the top headline for summer situations. I know that you guys are probably a lot more cap friendly than we are here in Tampa Bay, but is there any couple names that come to mind when it comes to prioritizing guys that need to be back in a Blue Jackets sweater this season?
Isn't it the whole rest of the league is better than you guys in cap? Usually
everybody. Everybody. I don't understand how year after year it's like we are confined by cap restriction, but magic is still made. I will give that to Julian Brisebois every single time. But now it's just the drama is getting to me because now we've got one of the faces of the franchise probably on the trade block here, and that one's a tough one to swallow for me. I've covered the team for 6 years, and he's been a part of every big moment for this team. So we'll see. The cap space is hitting me different this year.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because before I came to Columbus, I covered the blue. Sorry, I always get it's the BL that screws me up.
Right.
I covered the Blackhawks from like 2010 to 2017. So they went through this, right? They're actually one of the first teams to go through the whole cap squeeze thing, and it happened right away. They won the Stanley Cup in 2010, and like I think a lot of people forget, like they had Dustin Byfuglien when he was like in his prime, and they had to like
gosh,
get rid of him. They had they had Chris Versteeg. They had to get rid of him. Like they had who's I'm trying to slip my mind is slipping, but they had a number of guys who were established players who were really good, and they had to get rid of them because they just couldn't meet the cap at that point. And so for them to even kind of bounce back 2 years later says a lot, or 3 years later and win the cup again, and then 2 years after that win the cup again. It can be done, and obviously the Lightning are doing that as well. And so like Brisebois has done just an amazing job, I feel, of managing a really tough cap situation. So I would expect that going forward. But so getting to the Jackets. They're actually they are in a good shape as far as cap right now. I mean, Severson and Provorov took up a pretty good cap hit between the two of them, but they did get the 30% discount with the Kings picking up 30% of Provorov. So there's really no huge re-signings for this year. Like there's no UFAs where they go, we got to make a decision on this guy. There's none that really are it impacts significant guys. But July 1st comes and you start talking like, okay, when can we re-sign Johnson? And when can we re-sign Sillinger? And all these like these guys are going to be coming up. Sillinger's already going into his third NHL year. So like that's your ELC right there. Your entry level contract's already done after next year. So you're gonna have to figure that out and get get an extension for him. Because I know obviously they want to keep him. He was a 12th overall pick. Johnson, this will be his second, or well, this might be his third. I have to look this stuff up. I should probably know it, but like,
it's okay. I can't remember if summer break.
Yes, yeah. Well, because he played his second year. They drafted him. He played a second year at Michigan. Then after that season was over, he joined the Blue Jackets. I think that burned his first ELC year. So last year, I think it was his second one. So I think technically he's also going into his third ELC year. I think I have to look that up. Yeah, but so like they're gonna have to find extensions for these guys. Marchenko was 21, 22 when he came over. Because he was in the KHL. I can't remember if it was a 2 like all this. I have to remember if it was 2 year or whatever. But like they're getting a number of guys. Chinnikov's gonna be another one. The guy we talked about with the good wrist shot. he's going into his third NHL season. So like they're going to have a number of guys coming up who are young, who are basically coming off their ELCs, and they're going to have to figure out their first real extensions or their first RFA contracts, and those are going to be really important because as you know, if you get the wrong numbers or whatever, it's a difficult balance because if you pay them too much, so to speak, then you're going to be you could be in a cap crunch, right?
Yep.
But if you don't, then you risk like offending them, and maybe when they're going to ask for trades or they're going to, you know what I mean? Like the Jackets have been through all this stuff before, so this is a really important time for those young players, and it'll be interesting to see how they work that out.
Yeah, and the time is now because I know for us, like when you start looking at guys heading into their third year or potential extension conversations, like they're already starting discussions of Steven Stamkos's extension and where that's going to lie and how that's going to affect the numbers so that they know where these third year guys will stand and everybody else after the fact. So it's still a major priority. The number crunching never sleeps. But then that brings us to the most important conversation, at least for right now. We got the NHL draft coming up. And there's these top 4 guys are in the discussion to go number 3 to potentially at this moment the Columbus Blue Jackets, Leo Carlsson, Michkov, Will Smith, and then Fantilli. Looking at these odds, and I'll have to bring the graphic back up properly, but looking at these odds, do any of these names sound like the better option that could potentially head to Columbus at the 3rd pick?
Well, it's obviously going to depend on who goes second, right? So, if Fantilli goes second, and that's what most people are expecting him to go second, I think if you're the Jet, Yarmo has all but said that they're going to draft a center. John Davidson, the president of hockey operations, has actually come out on the radio and said we're drafting a center, like a franchise type center. So in my mind, that eliminates Michkov right there. He's a dynamic player, but he's a winger. And so then you got the other 3. You got Fantilli, you got Smith, and you got Carlson. If Fantilli goes second, which is what most people expect, I gotta think that they're probably going to go Leo Carlsson. And that's nothing against Will Smith. But Will Smith is there are people that are out there like, oh, he doesn't play in the defensive zone, he doesn't do this. All the flaws per se come out when these discussions happen. But Will Smith is a dynamic player. I look at Will Smith as a taller version of
I was gonna say his size.
Yeah, but he's 6 foot, so he's a taller version of Patrick Kane, only he plays center. And I said the same thing about Logan Cooley last year. Logan Cooley had a dynamic season for Minnesota. I think he's going to be a fantastic player too. So
I love Minnesota hockey.
Oh, it's awesome. Yeah, well, I like their logo myself. You can't beat a hockey playing gopher with a helmet on.
Right. It's the helmet. It's the old school helmet too. They didn't.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, the little leather cap. I love it. That's the first college hockey team I ever watched.
Oh yeah, I like if I would have known that, I would have worn my Minnesota hockey T-shirt for you here. Like I have the one with the gopher, and everyone's like, "Did you go to Minnesota?" I'm like, "No, this logo is fantastic. Like, are you kidding me with this? It's awesome." So anyway, Cooley had an unbelievable season and led them to almost the national championship. They're into the national championship game. I think he's going to be a dynamic player, and Will Smith is very comparable to Cooley. And I think that if the Jackets did pick him third, I don't think it's a wrong pick. The Jackets director of pro scouting is Josef Boumedienne, and he is Swedish. He lived in Sweden all up until I think last year when he came over here to be director of pro scouting. But anyway, he's the assistant general manager of Sweden's national team. And so at the men's worlds this year, the reason that Leo Carlsson played top line center, one of the big reasons Leo Carlsson got a chance to play top line center, I was told, is that Josef Boumedienne pushed for it and was like, hey, let's see what he can do on that top line. And I think he was outstanding in that role. And so he actually played in the men's tournament as the number 1 center with Lucas Raymond from Detroit and also Jonathan Berggren from Detroit. Those were his wingers. They were good. I thought they were good, and like Fantilli ended up playing fourth line left wing. That's not to say he's not a center or anything like that. I'm just saying I'm just
Right.
using comps. And so I don't know. I think Leo Carlson's going to be a dynamic force in this league. I really do. The more video I
Mhm.
watch on him, he's an excellent passer. He's 6'3". He's gonna get bigger. Like like I keep seeing the player comps or whatever. His is Anjay Kopitar. A lot of people look at him as like Anjay Kopitar. If you have a chance to pick Anjay Kopitar like in the third overall pick, I think you
You
take
take
that.
him.
Yeah.
Yes, you take him.
Well, I just wrote a story. I just wrote this for the Dispatch. It's just one of those fun ones where it's like, what if, like a what if draft type thing. Like Blue Jackets drafting history. What if they'd taken this guy instead? And one of the most infamous, I guess you'd say, instead of famous, be infamous ones here was, I think it was 2006. I'd have to look it back. It's either '05 or '06. Anyway, Jackets are sitting with the sixth overall pick, and it comes to them. They're on the clock. Anjay Kopitar is available, the actual Anjay Kopitar. And the general manager at the time was Doug McLean, and he's talked about this openly on the radio as well. But basically, his scouts were at the table, like pleading, like take Anjay Kopitar. Like we need a center for Rick Nash. Like remember Rick Nash? We need a center for
Yes.
Rick, and they never really found a true number one for him. So he's thinking, and they're all like, please take him, please take him. And he's like, he's Slovenian or whatever. And like, he takes Gilbert Brule. And Gilbert Brule, like, we can laugh about it now. He was having a great WHL season. So I understand that kind of thing. But man, if they would have been able to get him, that's 17 years. Like, do they even trade Rick Nash at any point in Columbus if Anjay Kopitar is his center for the whole time he's here?
No.
Like,
No.
like that one move sort of changes, almost like could potentially change the whole history of this franchise. Maybe people actually know we have a team in Ohio if we have you know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah, so I feel like if that's the true player comp for Leo Carlson, I think you got to take Leo Carlson there. So my gut
Yes.
is Leo Carlson, but we'll see. Like Will Smith's a dynamic player as well. And if the Ducks, let's say they take Mishkov, or if they take Mishkov, if the Ducks take Mishkov, all bets are off now. Now it gets really interesting because you got Fantilli sitting there, you got Carlson,
Mhm.
you got Smith. I mean, you got your pick of like dynamic centers right there. So it'll be.
Right. It opens up the field. I like Carlson as a fit too, and I never saw the Kopitar comparison, but what I love about that is that from what I was reading and looking at in his plays and stuff, because of his size, obviously that helps you create more separation, but it also allows you to draw in players to open up other players. So he can be used as a decoy, or he can be used as somebody who creates separations and opens those passing lanes to make things happen. And you said the perfect thing. He's only going to get bigger. He's only going to get stronger. So I just love him for a mix in of what's already happening on the Columbus Blue Jackets top line. It's really just the health and getting everybody else acclimated and situated and finding their identity in this system. But you've called it. Blue Jackets are not too far off from being remembered, which brings us to the final topic and just some fun odds. Now, when looking at NHL futures, Stanley Cup, that's what it's all about, right? And they're already talking about next year and who could potentially be lifting that cup. You got the Bruins as running favorites. You got the Vegas Golden Knights as potential back-to-backs. Avalanche on a couple I've actually seen leading the charge as favorites. Maple Leafs, boo. Hurricanes, so on and so forth. I had to boo them. I'm
Yeah.
still sorting through some things, but the conversation being here, the Columbus Blue Jackets sitting at plus 10,000 odds.
What a
Slightly
bet.
disrespectful. Slightly disrespectful. But here on Kasing the League, we do cash it, case it, or cut it. Cash it means you agree. You can understand where this evaluation came from. Case it means you got to do your own research because you feel like there's a better vantage point here. And cut it means we do not agree with this. It's not happening. So when looking at the Stanley Cup odds, do you think it makes sense for the Bruins, Vegas Golden Knights, and Avalanche to be the top three potential teams to be hoisting the cup? And or do you think the Columbus Blue Jackets need a little bit more respect on their name after everything we just discussed here?
Well, I do think that that's a good question because they were one point away from being the worst team in the league last year. and you
Yeah.
can't undercut that, right? And it wasn't all coaching, it wasn't all whatever. It was a bunch of different things. It was a bunch of injuries,
Mhm.
and that's the X factor, right? So you can look at the Blue Jackets and be like, oh, they haven't really done anything significant, yada yada. They're still young, they're gonna stink, blah blah blah. That's fine, and I understand that completely. But if they can get Line A to stay healthy for a full year, I mean, every time this guy has been healthy, he's a point a game player. Like, and he
Yep.
scored, and it's like he got when he was in Winnipeg, his job was to score goals. Like he
Yep.
scored goals in bunches, right? Here he's become more of a it's not a two-way player, but he's a double threat that he can pass the puck. People forget he can pass the puck and score goals still. And like he's almost even like goals and assists
Mhm.
every time he stays healthy. So if they can keep him healthy, and that's a big if, about a 6'5" if. Um, I think. If he can stay healthy and keep him with Gaudreau, and if Gaudreau, obviously he usually stays healthy. If Boone Jenner can handle certain things, there's all these ifs, right? But if the
Right.
ifs, this sounds ridiculous. If the ifs pan out in their direction, I think 10,000 is kind of crazy.
Uh-huh.
Plus 10,000. But I also don't see them as a cup contender next year. Like it's
Yeah.
probably going to take a year or two. And the other X factor would be Mike Babcock. Like
Right.
lots of complaints for completely understandable reasons, from fans or anything about and concerns and worries about Mike Babcock and what he's been accused of saying and doing, with Toronto and Detroit, coming in with a young team, like a young impressionable team, that kind of thing. Like I get all the concerns, but I also see a guy who has 700 career wins, and I see a guy
Yeah.
who is 12th all time in the NHL in coaching wins, and you don't get there by just being a meanie. Like you like
Like
you know
torts.
yeah, well, but Torts is a good coach too. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, excuse me, sorry about that. He's one of the all-time best as well. These guys don't. I mean, they have their own personality things that you got to deal with and stuff. But at the root of it, they know what they're doing coaching. They know about systems. They demand certain levels of performance, or you're not going to
Mhm.
play. Discipline, things like that. If this is what I think that they're going to come out next year, and you're going to see a whole different kind of Blue Jackets team. Now, fans will complain and say, "Well, they play too defensive," and you have all this offensive talent. That's what it was with the Torts at the end. It was like, "Oh, you're playing too defensive." You know what? I'd rather keep the puck out of the net personally. I'd rather keep the puck out of the net and like try to win 2-1 or 3-2 instead of like chasing goals and it's like 7-5 or whatever. To me, that's not
Mhm.
hockey. So I think you're going to see a more disciplined team next year with Mike Babcock running things. Um, and how much of an X factor is that in their overall record and how they're going to do? So like I think
Right.
that's the question you got to ask yourself when you're looking at plus 10,000. The other three, what was it? It was refresh my memory. It was Boston.
Boston Bruins, it was Vegas Golden Knights to go back to back, and then the Colorado Avalanche. So you've got Stanley Cup for Bruins at a plus 800, Vegas Golden Knights plus 900, Avs at that plus 1,000. Now, the Avs, I mean, they put their entire season on the back of Mikko Rantanen for starters. If it wasn't for him, I don't even know if they could have talked about the playoffs because McKinnon was injured. They lost their captain who decided to have that off-season surgery, so who knows when he'll be back in the lineup. But considering health for them, I thought that they would kind of top the Boston Bruins. I know we talk about the President's Trophy reverse curse now. That's a mouthful.
Yep.
But I also think that the Avs, if not for injuries, were probably going a lot further. I mean, it was Mikko Rantanen and McKinnon that even gave them a chance to compete versus the Seattle Kraken on top of Georgiev in between the pipes.
Absolutely. I like the Bruins a lot. It's gonna be. You start looking at the Bruins, and you would look at like Washington, and then the Penguins. Like those are the
I
three
was
that
going to say
they.
the Penguins.
Yes, and because they're all aging, they really
Mm.
you can't say it any differently. They're all aging, and so the question becomes, and we said the same thing about the Bruins last year at the beginning of the year, like okay, is this older team going to be able to like handle? And they came out and just dusted everybody until the play,
Very
and then they
true.
were up 3-1 in the playoffs. If it wasn't for like Bob got like red hot basically and just ended that series, which was a credit to him. But you know, you do have to ask these questions, right? Like, can they do it again? Like, can they do that again and be awesome and be ready for the playoffs and make a run? I think they can, but is it realistic to pick them one of the top three? I don't know. Let's look at honestly, I would put Florida in the top three. I would put Florida
Really?
yeah, because even though they snuck into the playoffs and all that stuff, they're going to be a very motivated team, obviously, coming back next year. I think
Yeah.
the one thing that they proved, and they did get outshot. Let's we can't look at or sugarcoat things as well either. They got outshot a lot,
Hmm.
and Bob was great like for most of it, and just the wall kind of crumbled because it was just too much at one point in the final. Also, Kachuk got hurt, broke his sternum. Unbelievable that he even played.
Ekblad broken foot. I mean, the injury reports were.
Goes on and on. Yeah, it was crazy. But when they're healthy, right? If they're healthy, I think like you look at a playoff team, to a typical playoff team, you want some grit and you want some grind in there, and you want guys. You don't want it to just come from the fourth line. It has to come from guys like Kachuk and other play. Like as the season went on and as the playoffs went on, I thought it became quite clear of what Bill Zito was looking for last year when he made
Yeah.
that trade, and everyone said, "You're crazy! You're trading Huberdeau and God, who's the other defenseman? It was
Um,
why
Crap, because
can't I?"
they brought it up too. There was a
And
lot of anger over Uberdo, but why is this other one blanking?
I can't believe I'm blanking on it because he's a really good defenseman, and I voted for. In fact, he was like one of my top 5 like Norris guys. Well, look, we can look it up, but and you can
I
edit
know.
this. So we don't look like we don't know. But anyway, they traded 2 good players, like one really star player and another solid defenseman, to get Brady or Matt Kachuk. And I think everybody kind of universally looked at that and said, "What are you doing? Like you're giving up this solid defenseman to make kind of a 1-for-1 trade with Uberdo and Kachuk." Well, Kachuk was like worth his weight in gold in the playoffs. I mean, he
Yeah.
was a massive reason, literally and figuratively, that they got through to the levels that they got through. So I like their team. I love Montour. He was another guy I was hurt, I think.
Oh,
um,
he was insane this playoffs round. He was so good
Totally.
at
Yeah,
his shot on goal consistency on top of how
yeah.
fast and how hard of those shots he was ripping from the blue line. It was so
It
great.
was it was crazy. Like he was really good. I like him. The other team that I do like, and I'll be interested to see how they do next year without Andrew Burnett on the bench helping out as a top assistant, is the New Jersey Devils. I
Yeah.
think they are loaded. They are loaded with. You want to talk about young talent? I mean, think about them. They've picked number 1 overall however many times in the last 5 6 years. They've had top 5 picks. They got Luke Hughes. They haven't even started with Simone Nemec, who they got 2nd overall last year. I think he's going
Mhm.
to get his shot this year. He was in the AHL. That's why they could part ways with Severson to the Blue Jackets. So like they're loaded, 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 and like I'm really excited to see if you like the modern style of game, and everyone seems to like it. They can play it. It's just a matter of whether they can kind of do it in the playoffs for a long, stretch of time. But I think that they learned something in the playoffs. I like them a lot. They would be my favorites or one of my favorites, probably in the top 3 next year. I think.
I love it. And then I guess just to close this out, since you brought up the Devils, because I think that the Metropolitan Division is what stacked probably the best when it came to trade deadline acquisitions and other cap movements that were taking place. Is this the best division in NHL right now?
The Atlantic.
The Metropolitan.
Oh, the Metropolitan. It's I don't know. I think it's close. Yeah. You're right. You look at it, and you got Rangers, right? Rangers haven't really lost anybody except their coach, and then now they got
Yeah.
Peter Laviolette, who is an established. He's been to the Cup final. I mean, he's a great coach. I think you might agree with you on that one. At least looking at it on paper. Although I still think the Atlantic is pretty loaded. When anytime you're talking about that, like I'm a full believer in the Lightning. I know that they got moves that they got to make this offseason and things like that. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on your show right now.
No, I know.
But like look at
It's
it. Like
true.
how could you not love what they have as a core group, right?
Yeah.
Like those dudes just produce. That's it, as long as they stay healthy, and if they can get Vasilevsky back on track, and I think that he's still young enough that can happen. When
Oh
that
yeah.
guy's on, it's almost impossible to get the puck by him. Like
Hmm.
any goalie's going to struggle at certain times, but when he's on, you gotta like what you have there. Hedman, all these other guys, it's pretty amazing what they've been able to build there. So I don't downgrade them until I see it. And Coop, I mean, John Cooper is one of the best coaches in
He's
the NHL,
brilliant.
if not the best, right? So
Yeah.
I would not discount them at all. I think they're still an elite team. Toronto, I think you still have to call them, with all that talent, you still have to call them at their core base an elite team, at least as far as the regular season goes. I know you don't like them. But
They might be losing their core four this summer, though. So, not
at
that
least
I'm
one
sitting
of
here
them.
banking on it. Yeah.
Yeah, one of them. It was Mackenzie Weegar was the guy. That was the defenseman
Oh,
that got traded with Uberdo. That was gonna drive me nuts. It was
thank
Mackenzie
you for
Weegar.
figuring out because I was trying to Google it at the same time, but I didn't want to
Yes,
lose track.
yeah, it was Mackenzie Weegar, which was, I mean, he's a fantastic player as well.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, getting back to the Atlantic, I mean, let's say the Bruins do it again, right? Like then you got the Bruins that you still have to deal with, even though they're getting older. Detroit's kind of on the way up a little bit. They're not there yet.
They were a pain, and now having our former assistant coach, Newsy, over there, I
Yep,
mean, there was games where they just had the Lightning solved, and the Lightning still produced quite well this past season. So I am kind of nervous about where the Red Wings
yep.
are heading.
And the Senators are another one. If they get like good season out of that, they're talented and young. Let's put it that way. If they stay healthy, they're coming up there. Who else you got that over in the Atlantic? I'm trying to think over the top of my head. Those are the top three. Typically, you had Tampa, Toronto,
Right.
Boston. Um, who else is over? Well, no, because the Islanders and Rangers.
Sabres.
Sabres, yes. Like, see, the Sabres
Yeah.
are another one for me. The Sabres are another one that I can't believe I forgot them. They're like the Atlantic Division's version of the Devils. Like,
Yeah.
they're young, they're motivated. Like, I like them a lot. And I think, to be honest with you, I'm hoping some of these teams take the next step, because I would like to see some new faces and new teams and new names in the playoffs. Like, it was
Hmm.
fun to have the Devils in the playoffs this year. Like they hadn't been in a while. I like seeing these new teams, get in there and do a few things. It's kind
Yeah.
of fun.
Yeah, and it was exciting to have that be kind of the headline and the frame of not only the playoffs, but what turned out to be the Stanley Cup final between a young franchise team and the Vegas Golden Knights, as well as the Florida Panthers kind of making their resurgence after 1996. But I think the overall encompassing idea of this upcoming season, that there's a lot to look forward to. There's a lot to not underestimate, and we've seen how young teams develop. You mentioned how there's guys that need to be kept on close watch for the Columbus Blue Jackets, but I think that they're definitely going to top their record. I could see a little over 32
Yep.
wins for the Columbus Blue Jackets. That's going to be my prediction for the
Okay,
upcoming season. So
you're
we'll see
going
if
on
I can
the limb
hold
there.
two. Yeah, we'll
Okay.
see if they can hold two. Like a couple weeks into the season, you and I will meet back here and chat about it, unless I get a chance to
Yep.
see you back down in Tampa. But other than that, Brian, thank you so much for coming here on Kasing the League and sharing your insight, not only about the players, the team, where this team is heading, but just your overall coverage. You can catch all of Brian's coverage over at Columbus Dispatch. And more importantly, follow us at Kasing the League. That's KASING the League on Believe Network. Follow Believe Network and Believe Sports to stay up to date on all brand new episodes, not only on Kasing the League, but of all other fantastic shows covering all sports across the way. I am your host, Casey Hudson, joined by Brian. And until next time, guys, we'll catch you on Kasing the League.